I realize many of you listen to these stories as you fall asleep. Before you drift off, please consider leaving a comment sharing where you're listening from tonight. If you're finding value in these accounts, liking and subscribing supports this channel immensely. Let me be clear, these narratives involve real individuals and genuine loss. We share them not for amusement, but to honor those affected and to highlight patterns that might avert future sorrow. For optimal comfort, you might lower your volume slightly, allowing the story to guide you gently toward rest. Now, make yourself comfortable, soften the lights, and let's begin our first account for this evening. Tonight, we'll journey into a tale that emerged from the structured world of military service, within the walls of a home that appeared utterly ordinary. This is an account of broken trust, of a marriage quietly disintegrating, and of how a simple daily ritual, a morning cup of coffee, transformed into a lethal gamble. So, settle in as I share the story of Melody and Roby Johnson, a case that started on the U.S. military base in Germany during the spring of 2023. Roby Johnson was a creature of habit. His role in the U.S. Air Force ingrained in him the importance of order and predictability. Each day launched with a steadying ritual, his morning coffee. That warm, familiar brew meant transition from sleep to readiness. In March 2023, Roby and Melody were at their posting in Germany. It was another temporary home in a life defined by relocation. They shared military housing with their young child. Yet, beneath this facade of normalcy, a fracture was widening. The Johnsons were navigating a divorce. Though not yet finalized, their 17-year partnership was ending nearly 2 decades of shared history, built amidst the unique pressures of service. 17 years is long enough to learn a person's rhythms, their preferences, their frailties, long enough to know precisely how they take their coffee. One March morning, Roby detected a peculiarity. His coffee tasted distinctly wrong, not merely stale, but unnaturally foul. He dismissed it initially, attributing it to unfamiliar water or odd coffee brands common on a foreign base. Yet the strange taste persisted the next day, and the next. It was a persistent, unpleasant note beneath the coffee's expected bitterness. For weeks, Roby consumed it regardless. He later admitted to only pretending to drink it, maintaining routine while a dreadful suspicion crystallized. A thought too dark to easily entertain. Was someone tampering with his coffee? Could that someone be Melody? Roby chose a path that would alter everything. Instead of a direct confrontation or dismissing his fears as divorce-related paranoia, he opted for a methodical investigation. His first step was shrewd. He purchased pool testing strips, designed to detect chemicals like chlorine. Testing the tap water yielded normal results. Testing the coffee, however, was staggering. The strips indicated dangerously high chlorine levels, concentrations suggesting deliberate adulteration. Someone was adding household bleach to his coffee maker. The reality was horrifying. Ingested bleach, even in small, repeated doses, causes severe internal burns, organ damage, and can be fatal. Someone was poisoning him. Day by day, cup by cup. Suspicion and test strips weren't enough for authorities. He needed irrefutable proof. Roby installed a concealed camera in their home, aimed at the coffee maker. The footage confirmed his deepest fear. It captured Melody approaching the machine and adding a substance. Yet, stationed overseas amid complex jurisdictions, Roby made a strategic choice. He would wait to report until they returned to American soil. So, for additional weeks, he maintained the agonizing charade, pretending to drink the poisoned coffee, living alongside the person he believed was his would-be murderer. The psychological weight of this deception is nearly unfathomable. In late June 2023, the family transferred to Davis Mountain Air Force Base in Tucson, Arizona, now under U.S. jurisdiction. Roby could act, seeking clear evidence. He set up another hidden camera in their temporary housing. The resulting footage, however, was deemed inconclusive by Tucson police when he reported on July 6th. The video was too grainy, the angle unclear, They declined to pursue it. Undeterred, Roby acquired more sophisticated cameras, designed to resemble common smoke detectors. After moving into permanent base housing in July, he discreetly installed them. On July 11th, the new cameras captured definitive evidence. The high-resolution video showed Melody taking a bleach bottle, pouring some into a separate container, and then pouring that liquid directly into the coffee maker's water reservoir. A week later, on July 18th, the cameras recorded her repeating the act. This time, the evidence was unambiguous. Roby returned to the police. The footage clearly showed Melody poisoning the coffee maker with bleach. Police obtained and executed a search warrant immediately. The coffee maker reservoir reeked of bleach. In Melody's private bathroom, the couple maintained separate bedrooms and baths. Investigators found a container that smelled strongly of bleach, later confirmed to hold the chemical. That same day, July 18th, 39-year-old Melody Filico Johnson was arrested. The charges were grave: attempted first-degree murder, attempted aggravated assault, and adulterating fruit bar drink with poison. Her bail was set at $250. Zorro heightened by prosecutor concerns she might flee to family property she owned in the Philippines. Remaining in custody, she awaited trial. In the wake of her arrest, one question lingered. Why? What motive could fuel such a slow, methodical poisoning? According to Roby's statements to investigators, he believed Melody intended to collect military death benefits. As a service member in the U.S. Air Force, Roby Johnson would have been covered by standard life insurance and survivor benefits, financial safeguards designed for his family should the worst occur. Even amid a divorce proceeding, his spouse, Melody, would typically remain the beneficiary. This established a potential mode of financial gain through a spouse's death, a cold, transactional logic seen in countless homicide investigations. Yet the method distinguished this case. It displayed no heat of passion, no explosive rage. It was a patient, meticulous act. According to the allegations, each morning Melody introduced poison into Roy's coffee. Each morning, she observed him consume it, fully aware of her actions. Had Roy's suspicions not been confirmed, had the poisoning persisted, the medical outcome could have been grave. Experts note that chronic, low-dose exposure to bleach can inflict severe internal damage. Roby reported emerging symptoms: digestive distress, signs of internal bleeding. Continued exposure risked catastrophic, potentially fatal, harm to his organs. More insidiously, his death might have been attributed to a natural illness, leaving no suspicion of a crime. The psychological dimension deepens the tragedy. Melody and Roy shared 17 years. They built a home, raised a child, and weathered the unique strains of military life. At sentencing, Roby stated that throughout those years, Melody had never before tried to physically hurt him. He characterized their conflicts as verbal and emotional, common marital struggles possibly amplified by deployments, relocations, and associated pressures. But a fracture occurred. The unraveling of their marriage allegedly propelled Melody from words to a slow, daily betrayal, poisoning the one daily ritual he trusted implicitly. Following her arrest in July 2023, Melody Johnson confronted the possibility of decades in prison for attempted first-degree murder. The charges were severe. The video evidence stark. She pleaded not guilty at her arraignment, represented by a public defender. However, as the case advanced, a shift occurred. Despite the compelling evidence, the clear footage of her adulterating the coffee maker with bleach discussions turned toward a plea agreement. In April 2024, approximately 9 months post-arrest, Melody appeared in court and accepted a deal. The attempted murder charge was dismissed. In its place, she pleaded guilty to 2 felony counts of adding a poisonous or harmful substance to food or drink, corresponding to 2 video-documented incidents on July 11 and July 18, 2023. Each count carried a maximum 2-year sentence, totaling for years. Her defender argued for time served. Melody had been jailed since her arrest, unable to meet the dual arrest $250 bail, and had thus already spent nearly a year in custody. The defense also cited her history of anxiety and depression, advocating for mental health intervention over further incarceration. The sentencing hearing on May 10, 2024, introduced a pivotal, unexpected element, the victim's testimony. Roby Johnson, the man who had endured months of poisoning and lived in fear while gathering evidence, addressed the court and asked for leniency. Through our 17-year journey together, he told Judge Javier Lopez, she has never attempted to physically harm me until last year. Her transgressions were predominantly verbal and emotional. He did not downplay her actions, but contextualized them within the complexity of their shared history. His request stunned many observers. While her period of incarceration may have imparted valuable lessons, Roby stated, I harbor doubts that it alone will address the underlying issues. Hence, I respectfully petition that Melody be mandated to undergo mental health treatment and educational programs in concert with probation. The victim of an attempted murder was pleading against prison, advocating for a rehabilitative path. The motivation behind this plea remains private. Perhaps Roby believed genuine mental health struggles contributed to her conduct. Perhaps he considered their child, who had already experienced the family escalation, would be further affected by a parent's imprisonment. Perhaps some fragment of their 17-year bond endured, an understanding that the person who poisoned him was not the totality of who Melody was. Melody, as attorney, reinforced this perspective, describing a client who had long suffered anxiety and depression within a toxic marriage. The defense alleged Roby had been abusive and cited claimed alcohol problem, portraying Melody as a woman driven to a breaking point by desperation and illness, not pure malice. Judge Javier Lopez considered all arguments. The victim's appeal for mercy, the defense's claims of mental duress, the prosecution's emphasis on the crime's seriousness. His sentence, delivered that day, was 3 years of probation. Melody Felico Johnson would serve no additional jail time beyond her year in pretrial custody. Conditions included mandatory mental health treatment and a no-contact order with Roby Johnson, except for legal matters pertaining to their ongoing divorce. The judge specifically noted the victims expressed desire that Melody not return to prison. The case of Melody and Roby Johnson lingers, provoking uneasy questions about relationships, trust, and the hidden darkness within seemingly ordinary lives. How does a 17-year marriage reach such a point? How does a partner, a co-parent, the person who knows you best, become someone you cannot trust to prepare a simple cup of coffee? More perplexing way, how does someone with no history of physical violence allegedly embark on a campaign of slow poisoning? Simple answers are elusive. The defense's narrative of abuse and mental illness suggests a victim pushed to extremes. The prosecution's theory of financial motive paints a picture of calculated murder disguised otherwise. The truth likely resides in a murky intersection of emotion and action where love and resentment, desperation and planning, psychological distress and intent converge. The established facts are these. For months, Roby Johnson consumed coffee tainted with bleach. He experienced symptoms he linked to the poison. Melody Johnson pleaded guilty to adulterating his food and drink. And ultimately, the victim himself requested compassion for the person who sought to harm him. As of May 2024, Melody began her probation with mandated counseling. The divorce proceedings continued, formally unraveling their 17-year union. Their child would forever carry the knowledge of what transpired, a burdensome inheritance no young person should bear. Thus concludes this account, a story of coffee that tasted strange, of concealed cameras and bleach, of shattered trust and unexpected clemency. It serves as a reminder that profound betrayals do not always unfold in dark alleys or during heated arguments. Sometimes they occur in sunlit kitchens, within the mundane ritual of brewing a morning drink. Sometimes the most perilous place is the one presumed to be the safest. I hope this narrative has provided material for reflection as you grow drowsy, not to inspire nightmares, but to acknowledge human complexity, the vital role of trust, and the fragile nature of the bonds we forge. If this is your first encounter with our true crime stories, welcome. I also wish to express my sincere gratitude to my wonderful subscribers for your steadfast support. If you're still listening, feel free to leave a comment sharing where you're tuning in from, or simply to say hello. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe so you won't miss our future explorations. Now, let's proceed to our second story. Story 2. Tonight, we examine a significant tale, that of a woman named Mariah. the choices she made to safeguard herself, and a system that failed to protect her in return. This is a narrative of courage and tragedy, of overlooked warnings, and a life ended far too soon. Settle in, release the tension from your shoulders, and listen. In the late summer of 2025, in the Willard A neighborhood of North Minneapolis, lived 33-year-old Mariah Rosanna Samuels. Those who knew her would agree, she was utterly unique. Mariah worked as a dog groomer, possessing gentle hands and a patient demeanor that animals instinctively trusted. Clients adored her not only for her skill but for her genuine care, treating every pet as her own. She had a gift for making others feel valued. She was a devoted mother to 2 sons. Her eldest, 11, was loved fiercely. She held dreams for his safe and strong future. Her younger son admired her free-spirited approach to life. Mariah's family was tightly knit. Her sisters, Simone Hunter and Selena Owens, were her confidants and protectors. Her aunt, Avon Winston, would later reflect that Mariah had been living her dream life. She loved butterflies. At gatherings to remember her, those who grieved wore pins decorated with butterflies, emblems of change, of grace, of a life that deserved the chance to bloom. She was vibrant, kind, and untethered. That is how her sister Selena remembers her. Mariah journeyed where possible, discovering the world, loving others without reserve. She had a closest friend, Connie Willis, who would later stand at protests, tears on her cheeks, stating plainly that Mariah's life was important. But in the summer of 2025, Mariah's path crossed with peril. Sometimes you encounter a person and believe you understand them, believe you see their true self, yet darkness can lurk behind an appealing grin. Violence can hide beneath gentle speech. David Eugene Wright was 51 when Mariah came to know him. He had served 15 years in federal prison for crimes involving firearms. Earlier, in 2003, he had been found guilty of domestic assault. The facts of that prior case were grim. After his girlfriend at the time ended their relationship, Wright aimed a stolen handgun at her and her 15-year-old child. When the teen tried to dial 911, Wright tore the phone from the wall, shattered it on the floor, and vowed to shoot them both. He received a 5-year prison sentence for that offense. Wright met Mariah within a year of his release from federal custody. He was under supervised release, meant to be watched, meant to be held to account. He was legally forbidden from having any firearm. For 7 months, Mariah was in a relationship with David Wright. 7 months that altered everything. We cannot see those initial days. Maybe you seemed charming at the start. Maybe you spoke the perfect words, made the right pledges. But by August 2025, Mariah understood she needed to leave. On August 21st, she called him. She ended it over the phone. Hours later, Wright found her. It was evening on August 21st when Mariah went to drop her 11-year-old son at his father's home in North Minneapolis, just blocks from where she lived with her own father. She thought she was secure. She thought ending things by call would create distance, would grant her space. But Wright had been watching. He knew where she was. When Mariah stepped outside, Wright was there. What followed was recorded by a surveillance camera of footage Mariah would later share on Facebook in a frantic effort to be heard, to be believed. Wright pistol whipped her. He hit her again and again in the face and upper body with a gun. He slammed her against a fence. He seized her throat. While still armed, he threatened to kill her. He threatened to kill anyone left inside the house. A friend watched the assault over FaceTime. Hearing Mariah's cries, powerless to help, Mariah called the police. But by the time they came, Wright had escaped. The Minneapolis officer who responded completed a risk assessment. The outcome was clear. David Wright presented a severe danger to Mariah's safety. Mariah cooperated fully. She told the officer everything. She gave her statement. She did exactly what domestic violence survivors are advised to do. Yet no investigator was ever assigned to her case. 5 days later, on August 26th, a domestic violence advocate from Hennepin County visited Mariah at home. Together they completed a petition for an order for protection, a restraining order. In that document, Mariah detailed it all. She wrote of Wright's threat to blow up the house where she lived with her father and youngest son. She described the pistol whipping, the choking, the threats. She requested protection for herself and her 11-year-old. The next day, August 27, a judge signed the order. It was formally filed in court. On August 29th, David Wright was served. Legally, he was now barred from any contact with Mariah. If he broke that order, he could be arrested for 2 weeks. There was a tense quiet, but David Wright did not respect boundaries. His text to Mariah grew more menacing. Cell records would later show escalating conduct controlling messages, jealous allegations, violent threats. In one text he wrote, "Man, someone going to die tonight." Mariah was terrified, but she was also resolved to shield herself and her children. She stayed at her ex-partner's house, trying to keep her location hidden from Wright. She trusted the system would protect her. She had done everything right. September 14th, 2025, began in darkness. Around 3:30 David Wright sent Mariah a barrage of texts. He was jealous, certain she was seeing another man. The messages were furious, accusing, harassing. Mariah woke to them on her phone, her heart heavy. She was staying at her ex-partner's home in North Minneapolis, a place she hoped Wright would live now. But something fell off. She was convinced Wright had been on the property. She believed he had tampered with her vehicle. At 5:14 Mariah called 911. She told the dispatcher Wright was violating the restraining order, that he was sending threatening messages. Two Minneapolis police officers arrived soon after. One was Officer Ryan Weber. Mariah showed Officer Weber the texts. She asked him to check her vehicle for damage. She was sure Wright had come to the property. She was sure he was stalking her. Officer Weber wrote in his report that Mariah told him she felt safe and that Wright would not know the address. That wasn't true. Later, when investigators reviewed body camera footage from that morning, they found something alarming. Mariah never said she felt safe. The words Officer Weber attributed to her words that might have changed everything weren't ever spoken. The footage shows a brief exchange. Mariah shares the harassing texts. She stresses that Wright should have no reason to contact her, no reason to come to the house, but she never states she feels safe. Officer Weber noted in his report that Mariah did not appear scared or frightened of Wright. He recorded that he found no evidence of damage to her vehicle. He did not offer her domestic violence resources. He left. It was not yet 6. Dajawa. At 7:37. Mariah posted something to Facebook. She uploaded the surveillance video of the August 21st attack, the video showing Wright assaulting her, pistol whipping her, throwing her against a fence. She included screenshots of recent text from Wright. 8 minutes later, 45, Mariah posted again. This time, her words were full of frustration and fear. She accused Minneapolis police of failing to protect her. She wrote that her ex-boyfriend had threatened her family, damaged her car, that she was being stalked that morning and law enforcement wasn't providing adequate protection. Her pleas were public now, visible to anyone on her social media. She was asking for help in the only way she knew. 5 minutes after that post, at 7:50, Mariah left the house. She got into her SUV. Maybe she was heading home. Maybe she was running an errand. Maybe she just needed to breathe, to move, to do something ordinary in a world that no longer felt secure. David Wright was waiting. Multiple witnesses saw what happened next. Wright approached the SUV. He opened fire. 15 spent cartridge casings would later be recovered at the scene. Mariah was shot multiple times in the chest and torso. The medical examiner would document 10 gunshot wounds. A witness in an upstairs bedroom of a nearby home heard 5 shots, then screaming, then more gunfire. He looked out his window and saw Mariah on the street. One leg still partly inside her SUV, her body slumped. Another witness saw Wright trying to pull Mariah from the vehicle. When he realized he couldn't drive away, he grabbed the bicycle from the SUV and fled. By 7:50 that morning, just minutes after posting her desperate appeal on Facebook, Mariah Rosanna Samuels was dead. She died on the street, just feet from her front door on the 1400 block of Russell Avenue North. Emergency responders arrived and pronounced her dead at the scene. David Wright was arrested the next day in Anoka, a city north of Minneapolis. During his interview at the Hennepin County Jail, he did not deny his actions. He told officers, "I'm not going to fight this situation. This is not going to be a hard-fought case." He urged police to read the text between him and Mariah, as if those messages could somehow justify murder, as if jealousy and control were valid reasons to take a life. Wright was initially charged with second-degree murder and illegal possession of a firearm. Bail was set at $1 million, but Mariah's family knew second-degree murder was insufficient. They knew Wright had a documented history of violence against women and minors. They knew he had been on federal supervised release and should never have been free to harm anyone. In late November, the Hennepin County Attorney's Office upgraded the charges. A grand jury indicted David Wright on counts of first-degree murder, one for premeditated murder and one for murder with a past pattern of domestic abuse. If convicted on either count, he would face life in prison without parole. Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty said in a statement, "The system we trust to keep us safe failed to protect Mariah. Even though she did everything we ask of domestic violence victims." Mariah's family organized rallies. Nearly 200 people marched from the site of her death to the 4th Police Precinct, chanting her name, demanding accountability. They wore purple, the color of domestic violence awareness. They carried banners with Mariah's photo. Her smile brightened the pictures, full of life. Her sister Simone Hunter stood before crowds and said, "My sister did not deserve to die. Not to be murdered like that so brutally. She did not deserve that." Her Aunt Vaughn Winston said, "We've had two battles to fight. We had to fight against domestic violence and then against our own justice system to get them to react and act in the way that Black and Native American women deserve." The Minneapolis Police Department's handling of Mariah's case exposed systemic failures that had been mounting for years. When Wright attacked Mariah on August 21st, police responded, but because Wright had fled before they arrived, the case was labeled gone on arrival. Such cases were supposed to be investigated, but due to severe understaffing, Mariah's case sat in a growing backlog. No investigator was ever assigned. No one searched for Wright even though he was on federal supervised release and legally barred from having firearms. The department's domestic assault unit had only 5 investigators, down from a dozen in 2019. Domestic violence incidents were the 5th most common emergency call in Minneapolis, making up roughly 1/3 of all aggravated assaults in the city since 2019. Yet resources for these cases had been cut in half by the time Mariah called 911 on the morning of September 14th. Officer Weber's response was inadequate. He misrepresented Mariah's words in his official report, claiming she felt safe when she never said that. He did not offer her domestic violence resources. He did not recognize the urgency of her situation. Hours later, Mariah was dead. It remains unclear why Wright's federal probation officer was never informed that Wright had been named as a suspect in the armed assault against Mariah. The reasons for his continued freedom remain opaque. He had breached the terms of his supervised release, a clear threat to public safety. He was nonetheless allowed to remain, a systemic failure laid bare, following a probe by the Minnesota Star Review. Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara mandated a complete audit of his department's actions in Mariah's case. He ordered that every officer undergo refreshed training on domestic violence procedures before 2025 concluded. He conceded that her killing had exposed a brutal reality of depleted staff and misaligned resources. For Mariah's relatives, these changes were an overdue echo. They insisted on a formal apology from the Minneapolis police. They demanded unvarnished transparency. They needed to understand why their sister, daughter, and friend had been abandoned by the very system she had faithfully engaged. When Wright was due for his initial hearing following the enhanced charges, he declined to attend. Mariah's family sat in the courtroom, prepared to confront the man who had taken their loved one, and he denied them even that. Simone Hunter stated, "It's the ultimate disrespect. To own your actions. You committed an atrocity. You must face the consequences. You understand it was wrong." Mariah's narrative is tragically common, a fact that is itself a profound devastation. Intimate partner violence ranks among the top causes of death for women nationwide. Repeatedly, survivors follow every directive. They contact law enforcement. They secure protective orders. They assist with inquiries. And still, they are murdered by their tormentors. The flaws within the structure are extensively recorded. Depleted police forces are strained to properly address domestic cases. Protective orders, though crucial, are merely documents, unable to shield a person from a resolute attacker. Ineffective communication between different levels of government lets perilous individuals evade notice. Mariah S.N. observed that the family waged a war on two fronts, one against the abuse itself, and another against a justice system that would not respond with due gravity. Black and indigenous women, she stressed, are entitled to the same prompt concern and safety as anyone. In the wake of the tragedy, Minneapolis leaders confirmed plans to establish a permanent, multi-insane domestic violence response unit. The aim was to detect dangerous patterns and step in before they culminated in loss of life. Yet Mariah's situation had already been marked as high risk. A victim's advocate had contacted her. A protection order was in place. The police's own risk evaluation had explicitly noted Wright as a severe danger. In spite of all these markers, Mariah was killed. Groups that aid domestic violence survivors are perpetually under-resourced. Shelters are full. Caseworkers are overwhelmed. Reductions in state and federal funding cripple the integrated support networks that can prevent deaths. Specialists stress that no simple fix exists. Domestic abuse is multifaceted, and victims cope in diverse manners. Some flee at once. Some cycle back to their abusers repeatedly before breaking free. Some, like Mariah, execute every step correctly and still pay with their lives. On September 20th, 6 days after Mariah's death, her family organized a memorial walk. They began at 1409 Russell Avenue North, the site of her murder, and proceeded to the 4th Police Precinct. The crowd gathered to honor the person Mariah was. They spoke of her compassion for animals, her talent as a pet groomer, her gift for making others feel valued. They talked of her to boys, now motherless. They recalled her independent soul, her vibrant personality, her kindness. Connie Willis, Mariah's closest friend, said she had an adventurous spirit. She cared for dogs. She cherished people unradiated vitality. Her sister Selena shared, "I wrestle with faith on this. I know he's Schulten, but it feels like she was the sacrifice. It was already destined. I love her. I will miss her endlessly. What brings me solace is knowing she's going to transform the world. And maybe that is the enduring hope, that Mariah's death will carry purpose, that her experience will compel structural reform, that other women in peril will find the safeguards Mariah was denied." The Minneapolis City Council approved a measure requiring police to account for their management of Mariah's file. The Minnesota Department of Human Rights, which had previously identified a pattern of racial discrimination by the city and its police force, continued its review. Grassroots organizers and anti-violence advocates pointed to Mariah's case as an urgent plea for improved protection, increased funding, and more effective training. As 2025 ended, David Wright was still held in Hennepin County Jail pending trial. The accusations first-degree premeditated murder and first-degree murder, demonstrating a past history of domestic abuse, could result in life imprisonment without release. A trial date remained unset. The wheels of justice turned slowly, but Mariah's family has promised to attend every session. Every legal step, they will ensure she is remembered. They will not let the system forget its fatal oversights. As you settle tonight, remember Mariah. Think of a woman who adored butterflies, who groomed pets with a tender touch, who raised a son she loved completely. Think of a woman who followed every rule to stay safe. And consider what her story requires of us all. It requires us to hear when someone expresses fear. It requires us to trust survivors. It requires us to expect more from the institutions sworn to protect. It requires us to admit that a legal document cannot block a bullet. Domestic violence is not a personal issue. It is a public epidemic. It is a collapse of our communities, our courts, our shared resolve to intervene. If you know someone living in fear, offer support. If you are in fear, understand that help exists, even when systems falter. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 800-199-7233. You can also text STA or T to 88,788. Mariah's story concludes in sorrow, but it need not end the discussion. Let her life and her loss have meaning. Let it alter the world, just as her sister was certain it would. If you're still with me, See if you've left your kind goodnight message. I always read your comments before I rest as well. And if you haven't yet, please like this video and subscribe so you don't miss our next true crime stories for sleep. Now, let's continue to our third account. Story 3. Tonight, we journey to a serene Missouri town where the usual cadence of daily existence was shattered by the unthinkable. This is a tale of devotion and deceit, of parental conflicts and despair, of decisions forged in shadow that would irrevocably reshape countless futures. On the morning of November 14, 2020, in the quiet suburb of Willard, Missouri, a neighbor's routine phone call altered everything. She had ventured out early, maybe for the newspaper or just to feel the crisp fall air. What she witnessed was alien to the tranquil street. On the front porch of the neighboring home, two forms lay still. Willard is that sort of place where faces are familiar, located a dozen miles from Springfield. It's a locale where violent crime is a rarity. Homes are tidy and unassuming. Kids pedal bicycles along pavements. Neighbors offer friendly waves from their lawns. It's a snapshot of the American ideal, where families plant themselves and grow. The officers who arrived encountered a scene that would linger with them. On that porch lay 28-year-old Alexander Stephen Chu and his fiancée, 30-year-old Brianna Sproul. Each had sustained multiple gunshot wounds. The quantity of spent cartridge casings littering the area hinted not at a precise, single shot, but a frenzied barrage. So many rounds were fired that detectives first assumed a chaotic exchange, a gun battle involving several people. But as Willard Police Major Shen Shipley later noted, discovering victims in such a state was virtually unprecedented in their peaceful community. This was where such violence happened. This was the neighborhood where you anticipated a homicide on a Saturday morning. Inside the residence, police made further findings. The front door was unsecured. There was no evidence of a break-in or an interior struggle. On a table near the entrance rested a waste pack holding Glock pistol magazines, plainly visible. And in the bathroom, concealed in terrified quiet, they discovered Alexander's 4-year-old daughter, physically unharmed but utterly alone and traumatized. The child could not explain the events. She had heard noises in the night, awful sounds, and had hidden as children do when reality becomes too terrifying to comprehend. Officers carefully carried her to Safety and Child Services, where she would stay while they worked to reconstruct the events of that November dawn. A .40 caliber pistol rested inches from Alexander's hand. Superficially, to an untrained observer, it might have suggested a murder-suicide. One firearm, to deceased. A dreadful domestic incident escalated to the extreme. But Major Shipley and her team were meticulous. They studied the scene with methodical care. When they located shell casings from a second weapon dispersed near the bodies, that initial hypothesis evaporated. This was no murder-suicide. This was something different altogether. Someone had approached that house under cover of darkness. Someone had arrived armed, and someone had fired upon Alexander and Brianna as they stood on their own doorstep, in the place they should have been safest. To comprehend that November morning, we must rewind to a high school in upstate New York, where two teenagers from uprooted backgrounds discovered one another and fell in love. Alexander Stephen Chu hadn't always been in New York. His roots were in Missouri, but life had moved his family north. His parents split when he was small, and like his brothers and sisters, Alex had periods living with his grandmother. It was a fragmented youth, the sort that etches itself on a young psyche, though his family would later describe him as affectionate and strong in spite of those early trials. Teresa Cox, for her part, hailed from North Carolina. She was also largely raised by her grandmother. After what relatives would later call a difficult early life, the specifics remaining partly obscured, it was clear she lacked the steady, supportive childhood every young person merits. When Alex and Teresa met in high school, they saw a reflection in each other. They were both newcomers. Both carried the burden of complex family pasts. Darrell Chu, Alex's father, later reflected they were inseparable, together constantly. Alex's mother, Lisa Pawnee, recalled how utterly captivated her son was by Teresa. It was youthful passion, deep and all-enveloping, the way it can only feel when you're 17 and the entire future seems to unfold at your feet. They went just after graduation. A sudden, passionate romance that propelled them both into grown-up life. Perhaps before they weren't really prepared, the young couple relocated to Missouri, back to Alex's hometown. where his family could offer a foundation as they started their life together. Within a few years, Alex joined the U.S. Army and the National Guard. He was constructing a future, embracing the duties of adulthood with focus and pride. Just as he completed basic training in May 2016, Teresa delivered their baby girl. It felt like a dream realized. His relatives would later say he adored being a dad, that his daughter was his entire world, that he was naturally good with her and cherished their playtime. He finally had the opportunity to be the father he always envisioned, providing the secure, affectionate home he had sometimes missed in his own youth. But Teresa found motherhood overwhelming. When Alex was briefly deployed to Poland, the new mother began to struggle. Alex's family intervened to help care for the infant. According to Alex's sister, Valerie Mathen, Teresa seemed to lack a fundamental understanding of what it meant to be a mother. She appeared to have no maternal instinct. Valerie would later reflect that whether this assessment stemmed from judgment or simple observation could never be fully known. What became clear was that the marriage started to fracture. By 2019, Alex and Teresa were divorced. They shared joint custody of their daughter, moving her between two households, attempting to co-parent despite the rift between them. It was a struggle, as custody arrangements always are, particularly when the foundation of the family is pain and disappointment. Alex rebuilt his life. He found love again with Brianna Sproul, and by December 2017, they were a couple. Brianna, 30 years old and a few years his senior, shared with him what seemed a genuine, supportive partnership. They got engaged. Together, they built a life in their Willard home, raising Alex's daughter in an atmosphere of renewed hope. Liz's path, however, was veering toward darkness. In the months leading to November 2020, tensions over custody escalated sharply. What had been a difficult but workable arrangement was curdling into something acrid and desperate. Alex made a disturbing discovery. His 4-year-old daughter was being left home alone at night while Teresa worked the late shift at a Springfield Pizza Hut. The specifics of how he learned of this remained unclear, but once he knew, he could not ignore it. He contacted Child Protective Services, a decision that would trigger an unforeseeable chain of events. Though in retrospect, the warning signs were there. CPS investigated, found the claims credible, and ultimately granted Alex full custody. The child would live permanently with him and Brianna in Willard. For Alex, it was a hard-won victory for his daughter's safety. For Teresa, it was a catastrophic loss. Her child was being taken away by the very system meant to protect her. Compounding this, there was now an active investigation into allegations of physical and sexual abuse by Teresa, while the full details never became public. On November 3, 2020, less than 2 weeks before the murders, Teresa was served with further papers from Alex's attorneys. Child support was being terminated. The custody battle was over, and she had lost everything. Investigators believed this was the final, humiliating blow that pushed Teresa from rage into action. But Teresa Cox was not one to act alone. She was a manipulator, a schemer who drew others into her plans. She had begun weaving her web months earlier, ensnaring those who would help execute a plot long forming in her mind. Teresa worked at a Springfield Pizza Hut, a common job for getting by. This particular restaurant would become the staging ground for murder. She had a new boyfriend, Duncan Bogle, who went by McSay. He was 20, 8 years her junior. Friends later described him as impressionable, eager to please, the perfect target for someone like Teresa. They met in August 2020. Almost immediately, according to one of Duncan's close friends, Teresa began pressuring him to kill her ex-husband. The friend told police Duncan came to him multiple times in tears, saying he felt coerced and didn't want to do it. Yet Teresa persisted, painting Alex as a monster and an abuser who endangered their daughter. She convinced Duncan that Alex needed to be stopped, a narrative entirely false. The truth was irrelevant to Teresa. Her goal was making Alex disappear. Bears' manager at Pizza Hut was Matthew Plum, 43, old enough to know better, yet she entangled him in her scheme as well. Matthew later admitted to police he knew Teresa was planning a murder. Instead of alerting authorities or stopping it, he assisted in the planning. He suggested scheduling the murder for a night they all worked together. He advised Teresa to report her handgun stolen beforehand, creating a paper trail to distance her from the weapon. He also agreed to provide her an alibi, claiming she was at work during the killings. Teresa even tried to recruit Matthew's nephew, 18-year-old Aaron Plum. The young man initially agreed, swayed by his uncle and his manipulation, but as the date neared, he withdrew, later telling police he couldn't go through with it. Even in his youth, he recognized it was wrong. Duncan, however, did not back out, despite his terror. His tearful calls to a friend where he said he didn't want to kill anyone. He proceeded. Teresa had convinced him that sometimes people had to die. November 13, 2020, a Friday night. The plan was in motion. Text messages between Teresa and Duncan revealed the progression. On November 11, Teresa texted about a possible change in plans for Friday. Duncan replied instantly, "Are you sure?" They decided to proceed. On November 13, the night before the murder, Duncan texted, "I need some time to air out my mind and get into a good place for tomorrow." He was mentally preparing for the unforgivable. That evening, Teresa, Duncan, and Matthew Plum worked the late shift together. Following the plan, Teresa feigned car trouble, claiming transmission issues that prevented her from making deliveries. This kept her at the restaurant, solidifying her alibi, while Duncan borrowed her car, which contained a 9 Smith & Wesson handgun, purchased by Teresa and reported stolen just days earlier. Around 11 p.m., Duncan called his friend from Willard. He was sitting in his car with the gun, crying, screaming, hyperventilating. His friend pleaded, "Don't do it." Repeatedly, Duncan hung up and stopped responding. A doorbell camera at Alex and Brian's home later helped establish the timeline. In the early morning hours, someone approached the house. Alex and Brianna, perhaps hearing a noise, went to their front porch. Then the shooting started, multiple shots. So many that investigators initially suspected a gunfight. But there was no fight. It was simply murder. Quick, brutal, and final. Alex and Brianna fell on their porch under the night sky, while their 4-year-old daughter hid inside the bathroom. Duncan drove back to the Pizza Hut. According to Matthew Plum's later testimony, Duncan was deeply distraught upon his return. Matthew drove him home, stopping at Rutley Wilson Farm Park along the way, with Aaron Plum and their ex-girlfriend as witnesses. Matthew threw the murder weapon into a creek, attempting to hide the evidence. The next day at Pizza Hut, employees noticed the restaurant was unusually messy, not properly cleaned after the late shift. Teresa and Duncan, who should have been working, had instead spent the night at the restaurant holding each other, trying to process what they had done. The general manager later said they seemed to be in fugitive mode. Indeed, they were. Within days, they dyed their hair, got a ride with a delivery driver to a truck stop in Joplin, Missouri, and vanished, heading west toward California and San Francisco, seeking an impossible escape from their actions. Major Shannon Shipley and her team moved swiftly. From the start, the evidence indicated a targeted attack, not random violence. But who would target this couple? The answer lay in plain sight. While examining the house, Major Shipley found old custody battle paperwork showing Alex's fight for full custody and theirs' loss of her child. This immediately focused attention on theirs' potential involvement. Yet Teresa had an alibi. She was at work during the shooting, confirmed by Matthew Plum and her cell phone data, which placed her at the Pizza Hut until 1. There's Jura. And home by 1:30 a.m. The timeline seemed airtight until it wasn't. As investigators dug deeper, cracks emerged. A search warrant for theirs' phone revealed those suspicious texts with Duncan. Change in plans possibly for Friday, and I need some time to air out my mind and get into a good place for tomorrow. What were they preparing for? On November 17, just 3 days after the murders, a tip came through Krimistorps mentioning Duncan Bogola's name. Investigators located Duncan's friend, the one he had called while crying and hyperventilating. The friend told them everything about the pressure Teresa had exerted on Duncan for months, her relentless campaign to turn him into a murderer. He recounted the phone call from the night of the killing, when Duncan sat crying in a car in Willard with a gun, saying he didn't want to kill anybody. Then he described the second call, after the news broke about the murders. He had phoned Duncan and said, "Mixai, you killed those people." Duncan's reply was ice cold. "Sometimes. Certain people have to die. The investigation accelerated. Questioned by detectives, Matthew Plum broke down and confessed. He admitted to helping Teresa construct an alibi. He advised her to report the firearm stolen. He told them he'd thrown the murder weapon into the creek at Rutley Wilson Farm Park. Police searched the creek and found the gun. Its serial number matched the box recovered from Ners's house. Crime lab analysis confirmed the shell casings from the scene were fired from that weapon. The physical evidence, the witness accounts, the digital trail all converged. Teresa Cox had planned the murder of her ex-husband and his fiancée, and she had persuaded for others to assist. On December 2nd, Matthew Plum was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, second-degree murder, armed criminal action, and evidence tampering. But Teresa and Duncan had vanished. They fled to California, perhaps believing distance would protect them, that they could disappear into the sprawl of San Francisco. They were mistaken. The U.S. Marshal Service excels at finding those who do not wish to be found. Teresa Cox and Duncan Bogle were precisely the fugitives the marshals track. Less than 2 weeks after Plum's arrest, on December 8, 2020, U.S. Marshals located them on a San Francisco street. They had cut and colored their hair, altering their appearance. Prosecutor Philip Purdy noted they were trying to blend in with the homeless population, maybe seeking anonymity among the overlooked. But you cannot outrun murder. You can dye your hair, change your clothes, put 2,000 miles behind you. The truth always finds you. Extradited to Missouri. They were charged with first-degree murder, second-degree murder, and armed criminal action. Duncan faced an additional count of child endangerment. Alex and Teresa's 4-year-old daughter had been inside the house during the shooting, hiding in the bathroom while her father was killed on the porch. Vernon Plum, Matthew's nephew, was also arrested and charged with evidence tampering for his role in discarding the gun. 4 people in total, each playing a part in ending 2 innocent lives, now face justice. The legal process advanced with heavy inevitability. The evidence was overwhelming, the witnesses credible. There was no real defense, no plausible alternate story. In January 2021, Teresa Cox and Duncan Bogle appeared for a preliminary hearing. 5 witnesses testified, including Matthew and Vernon Plum, detailing the conspiracy. The judge found sufficient cause to bind the case over for trial. Yet a trial never came. In October 2022, just before proceedings were to start, both Teresa and Duncan accepted plea deals. On October 26th, Duncan Bogle pleaded guilty. He admitted his role in the deaths of Alexander Shue and Brianna Sproul, pleading guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder and 1 count of child endangerment. 2 days later, Teresa Cox also pleaded guilty. She confessed to the murders, to orchestrating the entire scheme, to manipulating Duncan, Matthew, and Vernon into helping her eliminate the man who was once her husband. On October 31st, 2022, nearly 2 years after the murders, Teresa Cox and Duncan Bogle stood for sentencing. Alex's family was present, his mother Lisa Piney, his father Darrell Shute, his siblings there to see justice served, though no verdict could return the man they loved. Lisa Piney addressed the court. "Justice may be served here today," she said, "but it will never be enough for me." Darrell Shute was more direct. Looking at Teresa, he stated, "Suffice to say, she is the face of evil." Teresa was given a chance to speak. She talked of her daughter, claiming everything she did was to provide her the best life possible, that her child's safety and happiness were her priorities. She expressed hope that one day, if her daughter wished, they might have a relationship. To Alex's family, the words were empty. "We didn't expect anything from her, and she delivered." Lisa Piney said later, "I didn't expect anything because she's a psychopath." Darrell added. Duncan Bogle also spoke. "Unlike Teresa, he seemed genuinely remorseful. I just want to begin by saying I'm sorry to the family. I'm sorry to Alex and Brianna, and I'm sorry to Sophie," he said, using the little girl's name. "I don't know why I did what I did. I knew it was wrong. On the way there, I kept asking myself, what the hell am I doing?" The family was taken aback by his contrition. A lot of times, people don't have remorse like that. But he did. "We were all kind of shocked," Lisa noted. Carol Shue admitted. I was surprised. I do feel somewhat sorry for him. He was a tool for Teresa Cox, but remorse doesn't erase what was done. The judge sentenced both Teresa Cox and Duncan Bogle to consecutive life sentences, each for the murders of Alexander Shute and Brianna Sproul. Duncan received an additional year for child endangerment. Under Missouri law, they will not be eligible for parole until 2073, over 50 years from sentencing. Matthew Plum, in exchange for testifying against Teresa, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and evidence tampering. He was sentenced to 8 years. Vernon Plum, the youngest conspirator, faced evidence tampering charges. The specifics of his sentence are less clear, but he too faced consequences for his peripheral involvement. Alexander Stephen Shue was buried with full military honors, fitting for a man who served in the National Guard. His family gathered to remember him. To celebrate a life ended at 28, Brianna Sproul, guilty only of loving a man with a complicated past, was mourned by her own family and friends. She was 30, her whole life ahead, with plans and dreams she and Alex were building together. All of it ended in gunfire on a November morning. And the little girl, the 4-year-old who hid in the bathroom while her father was murdered, she is being raised by Alex's family now. She lives with her grandmother Lisa, her grandfather Daryl, her aunts and uncles, who love her and strive to give her the stable, loving home her father wanted. She is no mother now, at least not one present in her life. Teresa Cox sits in prison, likely for decades, perhaps for life, and the girl has no father. She will never feel his embrace again, never hear his laugh or be told she is loved. Reflecting on the case, Major Shannon Shipley captured its senselessness. She didn't want her daughter. I think she didn't want Alex to have her daughter. I think she just wanted to wipe that side of her life away. For Teresa Cox, losing custody wasn't about losing a child she loved. It was about losing control. Losing to the man who had moved on, rather than accept that loss or find a way to coexist for their daughter's sake. She chose murder. She chose destruction over surrender. Police Chief Tom Land, who oversaw the investigation, thanked his officers, the State Highway Patrol, Greene County Sheriff's deputies, the U.S. Marshals, and community members who provided tips. Together, we were able to get it done. He said that solving the case and securing convictions does not undo what happened. It does not bring back Alexander or Brianna. It does not restore a father to his child. Justice was served, as much as it ever can be in such cases, yet the void left by violence remains. The story of Alexander Stephen Shute reminds us how swiftly life can change, how darkness can invade the most ordinary places. Willard, Missouri, remains a quiet town. Children still ride bikes, neighbors still wave. But those who lived through those November days will never forget, never be quite the same. There are painful lessons here, about manipulation's dangers, how the vulnerable can be pulled into terrible acts, the devastating cost of untreated mental health issues, and the lengths some will go to avoid accepting loss. But there are glimmers of light, the friend who tried to stop Duncan, the investigators who worked tirelessly, the family rallying around a traumatized child. Matthew Plum, who eventually cooperated, perhaps seemed too late the magnitude of his actions. And there is the memory of Alex himself, by all accounts a good father, a loving partner, a man who served his country and tried to protect his child. He made the right choice in calling CPS when his daughter was in danger. He did what a father should. It cost him everything, but his daughter survives. She is loved. She is the future her father fought for, even if he did not live to see it. Perhaps, in the end, that is the only justice that truly matters. The child is safe. She has a chance to grow, to heal, to become who she is meant to be. This story does not have a happy ending. True crime stories rarely do, but it ends with truth prevailing, with the responsible facing consequences, and with a child who lost everything, surrounded by those who will help her find a way forward. If you're still listening, feel free to leave a comment. Let me know where you're tuning in from, the time where you are, or just say hello. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe so you don't miss the next true crime story for sleep. Now, let's move to our fourth story. Story 4. Tonight, we journey under the California stars. It's a tale of love turned dark, of promises broken, and of a man who survived what should have been his final moment. Our story begins not with violence, but with hope, with two people finding each other in the vast digital landscape of the mid-2000s, both searching for connection. The year was 2005. Gregory Muel Hill, a systems architect who had relocated from Oregon to California 5 years prior, was a man of quiet precision. At 47, his world was one of logic, clean code, and reliable routines. He built solutions, not dramas. Diana Lovejoy, born in 1972 in coastal Carlsbad, was his opposite in energy. A UC San Diego honors graduate and member of Phi Beta Kappa. She was a senior technical writer for a major software firm. Her drive extended beyond the office. She was a triathlete coach who had launched her own wellness brand, creating vibrant online content about nutrition and fitness. They connected through an online dating service, discovering shared passions for technology and the hiking trails crisscrossing the California foothills. Both felt ready for the stability of a lasting partnership. To their friends, they were an ideal pair. Their rhythms and senses of humor perfectly aligned. After a 2-year courtship, they married in a small ceremony in August 2007, settling into a spacious Carlsbad home chosen with a future family in mind. The desire for children became a profound sorrow. Diana endured 8 miscarriages. Each loss eroded their shared joy, layering grief upon a foundation once built on hope. A son, finally born healthy in September 2012, arrived into a relationship already fractured by the cumulative strain. By 2014, Gregory was unemployed. Diana became the sole income earner, while Gregory assumed the role of primary caregiver. Stress intensified. Diana developed a conviction of serious, elusive health issues in herself and, later, in their son. She insisted he needed high doses of a specific herbal supplement, refusing external medical evaluations. Gregory saw a healthy boy and a wife succumbing to anxiety. Marriage counseling failed to mend the rift. Their separation that summer escalated into a bitter divorce. Diana's allegations were severe. She claimed Gregory had sexually assaulted her while she was incapacitated by illness and had been abusive toward their son. A temporary restraining order was granted, but a subsequent investigation found no evidence to support her claims. The order lapsed, and the court mandated equal custody, with Diana ordered to pay Gregory a $120 settlement. Diana was incensed, earning roughly $10 a month. She resented both the financial judgment and the shared custody arrangement. As the divorce neared its conclusion in the summer of 2016 with a final settlement signed on June 27 and a $20 payment to Gregory due in 3 weeks, she had already set a different course. Amid the legal battles, she had sought firearms training, purchasing a gun in late 2015. Her instructor was Weldon Kenneth McDavid Jr., a 50-year-old former Marine and expert marksman. Their professional relationship deepened into an affair. Diana confided her grievances against Gregory, repeating the allegations the court had dismissed. McDavid, increasingly protective, agreed to a solution. For $2, he would eliminate Gregory and Muel Hill. On the evening of September 1, 2016, Gregory received a call from a man claiming to be a private investigator hired by Diana. The caller stated he had crucial custody documents to leave at a remote dirt path near Rancho Santa Fe, suspicious but entangled in years of conflict. Gregory agreed to retrieve them, bringing his neighbor, Jason Kovac, for safety. Gregory carried a flashlight. Kovac, a child's aluminum baseball bat. At the dark, isolated location, they found no documents. Gregory's flashlight beam soon revealed a figure in camouflage, prone in the bushes, the barrel of a rifle aimed at him. A shot rang out. Gregory felt a massive impact, a bullet entering under his left arm and exiting his back. He and Kovac fled under fire back to their car. As Gregory, bleeding heavily, drove them away, Kovac called 911, rushed into emergency surgery. Gregory survived by a margin of inches. The bullet had narrowly missed his heart. Police quickly determined this was no random act. At the shooter's position, they found discarded feces, which yielded DNA. The burner phone used to lure Gregory was traced via store security footage to Diana Lovejoy. Cell data placed both Diana and McDavid near the scene that night. The DNA matched McDavid. A search of his garage uncovered an AR-15 style rifle, a silencer, and a bag with 7 spent shell casings. McDavid was arrested on September 2, Diana on September 22, charged with conspiracy and attempted murder. They stood trial beginning October 2017. The case built on a web of digital records, forensic evidence, and testimony. Greg Mouvelel, having healed from his wounds, took his place on the stand. He recounted the phone call, the journey to the isolated spot, the glint of a rifle barrel from the brush, and the searing impact of the bullet. Jason Kovach followed, describing the terror of those moments on his frantic 911 call as Greg lay bleeding. The prosecution methodically presented its case. The burner phone bought by Diana, the DNA tying McDavid to the location, the rifle from his garage, the Celtar records, and the Dularis Stu Zorro transfer. Diana Lovejoy testified under oath. She stated that, a year prior to the shooting, Diana had inquired if she knew someone who could intimidate or even kill Gregor. Notably, Diana did not take the stand in her own defense. Weldon McDavid did. His argument hinged on his background as a trained Marine sniper. Had he intended to kill Greg Mouvelel, he asserted he would have succeeded. He claimed he was only trying to shoot the flashlight from Greg's hand, firing only when he heard someone shout, "I have a gun." He framed it all as a tragic misunderstanding and denied ever agreeing to a murder plot. The jury was unconvinced. After roughly half a day of deliberation, on November 13, 2017, the courtroom packed with family, media, and observers heard the verdicts. Diana Lovejoy was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and guilty of attempted murder. As the words were read, the color drained from her face. Her eyes widened before she collapsed. Gasps filled the room. Her family wept and called for help. The judge swiftly cleared the courtroom. A television reporter with emergency medical training assisted her until paramedics arrived. She was conscious but in profound shock. She was wheeled out on a gurney. Court resumed about 30 minutes later. The same jury delivered its verdict for Weldon McDavid, guilty on all counts. He buried his face in his hands and wept. The jury for woman later told reporters they saw through McDavid's testimony immediately, finding his account unconvincing and at times absurd. The jury believed McDavid had hit precisely what he aimed for. Greg Mouvelel's torso. Greg's survival was attributed to his turning to run at the exact right instant, not to any miss by McDavid. Regarding Diana's motive, the forewoman was unequivocal. She wished to avoid sharing custody and came Dularis 120. Zorro to her ex-husband. Sentencing, initially set for late 2017, faced repeated delays. Finally, on January 31, 2018, both defendants stood before Judge Simon Kowalski. Diana spoke first, weeping through a 15-minute statement in which she maintained her innocence. She claimed she could never deprive her son of his father, expressing pain that anyone could believe her capable of such an act. She attempted to discredit witnesses, including her own aunt, and argued the system had failed her. She alluded to a higher reality behind her and McDavid's actions but never clarified its meaning. Judge Kowalski responded pointedly. He noted her claim of having no voice at trial was completely your choice, as she had opted not to testify. He also addressed her odd explanation for searching for the next new moon phase, which the prosecution argued was to plan the attack on the darkest night. A new moon is no moon, the judge stated. So, if your son likes to look at the moon, why are you looking up no moon? That makes no sense. McDavid spoke next, insisting he never meant to shoot Greg Mouvelel and had no intent to kill. That's not who I am, he said, arguing that his marksmanship proved his innocence if he had wanted Greg dead. He would not have missed by more than 2 inches. The judge replied, "Mr. McDavid, let me briefly respond. 12 unbiased persons came to unanimous decisions, rejecting your claims." Enough said. Prosecutor Jody Breen then addressed the court, observing that both defendants blamed everyone but themselves. "What you hear is it's everybody else's fault but their own," she said. Judge Kowalski pronounced sentence. Diana Lovejoy received 26 years to life in prison. Weldon McDavid received 50 years to life and was ordered to pay Greg Removal L. Dolores 500 Zaro in restitution. Diana will be eligible for parole in 2043. She is currently incarcerated at the Central California Women's Facility in Coachella. Greg Removal survived. He recovered physically. Those psychological scars endure. He gained sole custody of his son and has lived a quiet, private life in Carlsbad, focusing on raising his child. The bullet meant to end his life missed his heart by a whisper, a slightly different angle or a moment's hesitation, and this would be a story of murder, not attempted murder. Diana Lovejoy, once a successful technical writer and fitness coach with a growing YouTube audience, now lives behind bars. The woman who believed violence could solve her problems learned that justice, however delayed, ultimately arrives. Weldon McDavid, a trained Marine who thought his skill made him untouchable, learned that weapon expertise does not confer immunity from consequences. And in Carlsbad, a young boy is growing up knowing his mother tried to have his father killed, that his father survived by chance and reflex, and that his mother will likely spend all his childhood in prison. What drives a person to murder? What calculus leads someone to believe ending another's life is the answer? For Diana, it seemed a confluence of resentment over losing full custody, anger at the Dolores 120 Zaro settlement, a belief Greg had wronged her despite no evidence of abuse, and a relationship with McDavid that enabled her worst impulses. Perhaps it was simpler, an inability to accept she didn't get her way, that a court ruled against her, forcing her to share her son, her money, and her life in ways she rejected. Murder is often about control. When someone feels they've lost control over their life, circumstances, or future, violence can appear a way to reclaim it. But control is an illusion. Diana thought she was taking control by hiring McDavid. Instead, she set in motion a chain of events that lead to her imprisonment, the loss of her son, and the ruin of everything she claimed to protect. The truth investigators found was simple. Diana didn't want to share custody, didn't want to pay, and was willing to kill to avoid both. She failed, and in failing, she lost everything. Now let's move to our final story. Tonight, we go to the heart of Central California, to a small city where families gather, neighbors know one another, and where, one September evening, a life filled with light met a devastating end. This is a story about love that began in innocence, promises made too young, and the moment when letting go became impossible for one person to accept. Let me tell you about Yesenia. In the autumn of 2025, in the quiet town of Reedley, California, lived a woman described by friends and family as radiant. Yesenia Roca, known as Jessie to those closest, was 43 years old that September. She was a mother, a friend, a daughter, and, to many, simply light itself. Martha Azevedo, one of Yesenia's closest friends, would later say they texted every single day. They had a small group chat where women shared their lives, laughter, and struggles. Yesenia was the one who lifted others, bringing energy and joy to every conversation. Another friend, Darlene, remembered Yesenia's smile as radiant, the kind that would illume the moment she entered. Beautiful inside and out, Darlene said, and she meant it. Yesenia had two children, a daughter, Tella, 23, and a son. 20th to them, she was everything, their center, their constant support, the bright light in their lives. But Yesenia's story reaches back decades, to a middle school classroom. Picture two teenagers in a California school, hallways echoing with locker slams, adolescent chatter, and the nervous energy of first crushes. This is where Michael Roca met Yesenia. Their story began there. They started dating as middle schoolers, just kids with their whole lives ahead. They fell in love with the intensity and certainty of youth, believing it would last forever. In a way, it did. They dated through their teens, through high school, through the milestones of growing up. Eventually, they married. Years passed, 25 years of marriage. A quarter century. They built a life, had two children, created a family. From the outside, it looked like a timeless love story. Childhood sweethearts who beat the odds. but beneath the surface, fractures were forming. In August 2025, after 25 years of marriage, Yesenia made a decision. She filed for divorce. By early September, the couple had been separated for 2 months of renegotiating life apart. To her friends, this was an act of courage. Yesenia was choosing freedom, choosing herself. Martha saw her as brave for leaving, for seeking that freedom, even if briefly. To Martha, Yesenia's taste of freedom was a victory. For Michael Roca, however, the separation was catastrophic. According to his mother, Rita Roca, Michael could not cope. He couldn't accept that the woman he'd loved since middle school, his sweetheart, his soulmate, was choosing to leave. Rita would later tell reporters, through tears, that both families were now destroyed. Her son had been her world. Yesenia had been her children's world. And because Michael couldn't let go, everyone lost everything. But we're getting ahead. Let's return to that September day, to the moments before everything shattered. September 6, 2025, a Saturday afternoon in Reedley. The day began ordinarily. Yesenia texted Martha that morning around 6:48, normal chat between friends who spoke daily. There was no warning, no farewell in those messages. That afternoon, there was a family gathering. The intersection of Curlier and Frankwood Avenues was an ordinary neighborhood corner, soon to be transformed into a shrine of grief. Blanketed with floral tributes, flickering candles, and the palpable weight of loss, family had gathered there. His IAS children, Kala and Jacob, now young adults, were sharing a weekend afternoon with their mother and relatives, a simple and remarkable family moment. Then Michael Rocher arrived, the boy she had known since childhood, the man she had been married to for a quarter of a century, the man who, by his own mother's account, could not envision a life apart from her, nor allow her to have one without him. As Reedley Police Chief Mark Edgar would later detail, Michael approached the vehicle where Yesenia was seated. His movements were calm, measured. He opened fire. Witnesses counted 15 distinct shots, each one fracturing the calm of the day. Some reports stated 10 bullets found their mark. Others said it was more. The precise number is secondary. What remains is that Michael Rocher fired repeatedly in front of his children and family, obliterating the woman he professed to love above all else. The call reached Reedley Police shortly before 5:30 that evening, though some timelines place it closer to 8. A shooting, multiple rounds, a woman down. Officers arriving at Parallel and Frankwood Avenues found Yesenia roll lifeless inside a vehicle, succumbing to multiple gunshot wounds. She was 43. Michael Rocher was gone, having fled in a white Chevrolet pickup, vanishing into the vastness of California while his family stood paralyzed in the wake of his violence. Relatives gave chase, desperate to intercept him, but he was already beyond reach. For those critical initial hours, police had no trail. Fear spread through the community. An armed and dangerous murderer was loose in Fresno County. Michael's sister, Gina Rocher, provided photographs of her brother and his truck to investigators, demanding immediate justice for her sister-in-law, justice that would not pause until Michael was located. Dead or alive, the night yielded no answers. Michael remained at large. On Sunday, September 7, the morning after Yesenia's killing, a white Chevy pickup was sighted in Wood Lake, a small community roughly 30 miles southeast of Reedley, in neighboring Tulare County. Deputies from the Tulare County Sheriff's Office responded. They located Michael Rocher's truck around 1:0 p.m. and initiated a traffic stop. He refused to halt. A pursuit ensued. Vehicles speeding down rural routes. Then, from his truck, Michael made the decision that would end it all. He aimed a rifle at the deputies and fired. Shots rang out once more, now directed at officers attempting to apprehend him. The deputies returned fire. The chase continued, a deadly exchange of bullets, until it concluded near Road 222 and Avenue 340, just outside Wood Lake. Michael Rocher stopped his truck, emerged with the rifle, and unleashed another volley at the deputies. Witnesses said he was trying to kill them, just as he had killed his wife. The deputies fired back. Sheriff Mike Budrow later told reporters Michael received what he deserved. Paramedics rushed to the scene, but it was too late. He was pronounced dead at the site, less than a day after murdering the woman he called his soulmate. In one brutal weekend, Kala and Jacob Rowe lost both parents. Their mother, their guiding light, was executed before their eyes. Their father, who should have been their protector, became the agent of their devastation. Jacob later told reporters he wished for one more moment with his mother, to hold her, to say he loved her, to give a final embrace. But that man, he said, took everything. He no longer called him father. Kayla spoke of her mother's brilliance, her unwavering presence, her being everything to them. Everything, she said, and now nothing. Rita Ratjaw, Michael's mother, confronted a grief of her own. She had lost her son. But unlike her grandchildren, she placed blame squarely where it belonged. She offered no excuses, labeling his actions cowardly, a selfish escape from the unbearable prospect of divorce, an inability to accept that his sweetheart no longer wished to be his. Jacob mourned a stolen future. His mother would never meet his children. His sister's kids would never know their grandmother's luminous smile. All those potential moments were erased by 15 gunshots on a September afternoon. In the following days, the corner of Peril IR and Frankwood became a memorial. Flowers accumulated, candles glowed at dusk. Handwritten notes piled up, words of love and sorrow penned for a woman who would never see them. On Sunday, September 14, a week after Michael's death, the Reedley community gathered for a candlelight vigil. Friends and family came not only to mourn EUC and Ia, but to acknowledge the fragility of their own lives. We are not promised tomorrow, they reflected. What happened to Inaya could happen to anyone. Martha and Darlene, among countless others who knew Yeniye, attended. They shared memories, wept, and grappled with the haunting questions survivors often face. Could we have done more? Martha believed they had built a strong support system for Yeniye, guiding her through the separation and divorce, into a new chapter. Yet it proved insufficient. Because the threat wasn't a stranger, it was a man who had known her since they were 12. A GoFundMe was created to cover funeral expenses, describing Yeniye as deeply loved by all who knew her, her absence leaving a void that could never be filled. What compels a person to such violence? What twisted logic convinces someone that if they cannot possess the one they love, then no one should? These questions haunt domestic violence cases, reverberating in courtrooms and support groups worldwide. The answers are entangled in psychology, culture, and personal history. But perhaps the more urgent question is, how do we prevent it? Shaw demonstrated immense courage by filing for divorce, taking the steps so many in perilous relationships find impossible. She chose freedom, yet it still did not save her. Research from domestic violence organizations consistently shows that the most dangerous period for a victim is often when they attempt to leave. Leaving threatens the abuser's control, their sense of ownership, and some, like Michael Rocher, would rather destroy what they cannot hold than relinquish it. Michael and Yosinaya's story started innocently, in middle school corridors and youthful dreams. But somewhere along the path, love warped into possession, commitment mutated into control. And when Yasinaya sought to reclaim her autonomy, Michael ensured she would never get the opportunity. Let us not remember Yeniye Roa for how she died, but for how she lived. She was a mother who meant everything to her children, a friend who checked in daily, who lifted spirits, who carried energy and light into every room. A woman with a radiant, room-filling smile. In her final months, she found the courage to choose herself, to believe she deserved better, to grasp for freedom. Her friend Martha noted that while YS's freedom was tragically brief, it was still a victory she experienced, however shortly, what it felt like to live on her own terms. Kella and Jacob now carry their mother's memory. They rely on family and faith, navigating a world dimmed by her absence. They will never stop missing her. They will never cease wishing for a different outcome. For those hearing their story, we can honor Enya by recognizing that domestic violence is not always loud and conspicuous. Sometimes it wears the face of a childhood sweetheart. Sometimes it hides behind decades of marriage and shared history. The warnings were present: the inability to accept separation, The desperation, the perception that we and I belong to Michael, not to herself. But hindsight is always clearer than the present moment. So we reach the end of Yes-I's story, one that began with hope and concluded in tragedy. A story underscoring life's fragility and how swiftly light can be snuffed out. If you or someone you know is in a dangerous relationship, please seek help. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24/7 at 1-800-799-7233. In Fresno County, the Marjorie Mason Center can be reached at 559-233-4357. You are not alone. You do not have to stay. Support and safety are within reach. Thank you for listening to tonight's true crime account. Rest peacefully, with another story awaiting you next time, ready to accompany you toward restful sleep. If you're still awake, please like and subscribe so you won't miss our future narratives. Until next time, stay safe and take care. Good night.